In this video, I want to cover extending the stat system. Now, we'll be doing this in Blueprint, however, it is the exact same concept in C++, and it's really quite simple. So what I mean by extending the stat system, I mean adding additional stats to, say, a firearm. So for reference, here we have the firearm, we'll go to the M4, we have our stats. This is the default, what it comes with, so weight, durability, ergonomics, accuracy, recoil, and fire rate. So I want to add another stat on here, and quite frankly, I'm a little bit brain dead at the moment, but I'm just going to call it potato. So we're going to have potato be our new stat and somehow affect our procedurals. So to begin, what we're going to do is we're going to right click out here. We're going to create a new Blueprint class, and we're going to search for SKG, and that'll bring up pretty much all my stuff. So if we scroll down a little bit, we'll have some, maybe we got to scroll a little bit farther than I thought, data assets. Here we go. So the first thing we want to do is we want to extend the SKG PDA firearm stats. So BP underscore PDA tutorial firearm stats. Bad name, but gets the point across. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and add a variable to it. So we're going to add potato and make it a float. Or I guess in Blueprint it's technically a double, maybe. Default value, we'll leave it at 0. And now we want to simply, well, create a new data asset. I don't think we can reparent. I guess not. So we're going to create a new data asset. So we're going to right click, go to miscellaneous, data asset, search for our PDA tutorial firearm stats, and call this one DA underscore M4 underscore tutorial stats. And here we have our new potato option. And I want to leave that in a separate category because I don't want it to really have, influence or joined here. I want to keep it separate for easy visualization. Now we simply open up the M4, go to our firearm component, and initialize, and here we have our stats. So we're going to select our tutorial stats, compile and save. And now we just need to do the same thing in regards to the stat component. So let me actually move these. I'll move them to the root. All right, so here we have our firearm stuff, and here we will have search for SKG PDA. We have our firearm attachment stats. So we'll add this, BP underscore PDA underscore tutorial, firearm attachment, if I can type, stats. Open that up. We're going to add a new variable and call it, again, potato. Just to kind of keep things simple. This can be called potato modifier, kind of whatever you want. Now, same thing, create our data asset, miscellaneous data asset, search for tutorial. We have our tutorial firearm attachment stats, and DA underscore, let's see, we're going to do this, let's see, we'll do it on the, I guess we'll do it on the handguard. Handguard tutorial stats. And we'll have those. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my handguard stats. Can I copy this whole thing? Yes, I can. Please work. Sweet. All right. So here's the default for the handguard, and I'm going to give potato a value for this handguard of, I don't know, 11. Then open up the handguard because I want to put the attachment stat to it. We're going to click on our firearm attachment stat component, and we're just going to do our tutorial stat that we just made. Compile and save, and we are very close to being done. Now the only thing we need to do is we need to figure out how to actually use that additional logic. So the way I have this set up is there are 3 functions you can override. So one is add firearm attachment stats, has a default implementation, which simply adds it to a structure that's already kind of set up. Now this one is in the case of like the default use, so to speak. So you're going to set up your own way of kind of doing this, but in extension. So in C++, you can just extend this and you're good to go. You'll have a cleaner setup. But unfortunately with Blueprint, you don't really have the luxury of extending structures. So the main one we really want to work on is the calculate procedural values. So what we can do here is, in this case, I have my procedural stats, and I set the values accordingly. So we're going to do something quite similar. So let's create a blueprint class. It's going to be the SKG firearm component. Call this one BP underscore firearm component tutorial. That looks spelled somewhat right. And we want to override the calculate procedural values, add firearm attachment stats, and remove firearm attachment stats. And I'll put this at the bottom. Like so. So as you can see, these two take in the stat component. So what we can do is if I run a print string, we'll just print out the name and go to here. I need to actually change the component used here. So let's see. Grab the BP firearm component. And I want to make sure I have everything carried over. Does this still crash when you do that? Pretty sure that, I don't know if that used to do that in 5.2 as well or not. But anyways, let me load stuff back up. Alrighty. Put stuff kind of back in place. Guess I'm going to re-add the component. And I'll do stuff manually. So skeletal mesh. The attachment manager component. The firearm attachment stats there. I think it was mostly that. Yeah, I think that's right. So now I'm going to delete this component. Let's see, maybe I can rename. Then remove, and hopefully it'll allow me to transfer the stuff back. So that's on firearm 1. Okay, and hopefully I can hit play. There we go. Okay, so we had let me clear this, a print. So here's our components right here for all the attachment stats components, basically. So that is, the heck am I? Oh, here we are. So that's what got printed out if I remove it. Oh, come on. There we go. So if I remove it, press play, now nothing gets printed out. So we know that we're kind of on the right track. So we don't need to cast a stat component or anything like that, but what we want to do is we want to search for get attachment stats data asset. And we'll just do that for both. And here's how we, for the most part, would want to, you should say like accumulate the defaults. So we also want to make a call to the parent function. And that is because there is I wonder where I was at. The defaults here where it goes ahead and it applies everything to, well, the parent. So it'll basically call and run my logic in conjunction with whatever custom work you decide to do. So make sure this works. Still have all of our procedurals and they feel correct. Now from here, we want to cast to our custom type. Now, not all of them will have this, but since we are calling super, that's not really a problem. We only want to account for the additional stuff. So here we want to pass or cast to, what was it called? This will be the tutorial firearm attachment stats. And let's confirm that this does in fact get printed out. And we get 1, which is correct because we only have it applied to the handguard. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and get our value of potato. So we're going to create a new variable, call it potato stat. I guess that's an okay name. And in this case, we are going to make it very simple. We are going to add potato to our potato stat. And when it gets removed, we're going to do the exact opposite and simply remove it. So we take potato and we subtract out the passed in potato. Okay, I should probably actually print that out so we know what's, what it is. And screw it, we'll do that on tick, just to son of a gun. We can see it changing the entire time. And duration is just delta seconds. So as you can see, it went up to 11. So if I remove the handguard, we're at 0. If I add the handguard back, we're back at 11. So we now have our custom stat. Now, ideally, here's where you're also going to want to replicate this so other clients can see it. So if I were to play as a client, hopefully it'll show it correctly. So client is at 0, server's at 11. If I remove the handguard, server's at 0, client's still at 0, add it back, server's at 11, client's still at 0. So that's obviously not correct. So we can just simply, because remember, all this logic, by the way, runs server side. Well, with the exception of this runs client side. We can simply make our variable replicated and give it a try. So client is at 11, server's at 11. Remove the handguard, both are at 0. Add the handguard back, both are back at 11. So now your stat is replicated. Very, very simple. So from here, now this is where it's a little bit incomplete, but we would want to modify our procedurals. So for reference here, if I go to we'll do specifically the cycle aim point interpolation settings. These properties are not editable in Blueprint. I need to actually go through, wait a minute, am I goofing? Yeah, so basically all I need to do is I need to mark these as view properties so that way they can be edited, but that'll be in the next update. But pretty much the logic is very much the same as here. So the only difference is instead of just setting them to the defaults, which is what I'm doing because this is intended to be overridden with your own logic. So if you did not have any custom stats or anything like that, you wouldn't need to do anything with the data assets, no making a parent. The only thing you would need to do is override the firearm component. And from there, modify the calculate procedural values to modify them as you want. So all of these here, so we'll focus specifically on we'll do the movement lag, spring interp settings. If we come over to the firearm component, where I'm at, it's the procedural anim component of the firearm, sorry. We come down to, we're looking at movement lag. Movement lag, use spring interp settings. It would be modifying all of these values. So as you move, it's basically changing how the sway is affected here. Keep getting lost where I'm at. And then same thing for the rest. So your rotation lag, your cycle aim point, so basically how this happens, and all of that gets affected through this function. So you would be overriding it and applying it to these stats pretty much however you want. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So that'll be the only change I need to make. I completely forgot to do that before I made this video. So let me actually do that really fast and I'll give you a quick example. Alrighty. So now that that's done, basically the way we're going to do this, disregard, is we're going to modify which I had to make as a property, the procedural anim data. So only one portion of this is exposed for Blueprint. But basically if we search for procedural anim data, we can go ahead and get it. We're going to right-click and split one more time. The reason we have to do that twice is because only one portion of it is actually exposed for blueprint access, which is the procedural side. From here, we want to search again for procedural anim data. We're going to call set, split, and split. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and plug all of these in just by default. And now we want to go ahead and we'll make potato modify the, what do we want to do here? The easiest one I think to show is going to be the cycle aim point spring interp settings. So what I can do is I can drag off of here and do a break. And here we have our location and our rotation for the spring, spring interpolation. So we're going to grab our potato stat, and let's see here. We are going to make it, let's also do a make. I'm trying to think of what to modify. So we're going to make it modify the stiffness for the location and the rotation. Everything else is going to be left the same, like so. And now let's make it have a big, well, this should be a noticeable difference enough. So here it looks pretty similar. It's just a little bit less springy. But if I remove the handguard, oh, right, the attachment's on the handguard, duh. So let's make potato, we'll do 1. So a very low springiness. So now, as you can see, our potato stat has affected our cycle aim doomajiggy. So now it's super fast because we have high potato. Oops. But yeah, that's pretty much all you need to do. So I'm going to do a quick little rundown because I am starving. So from the beginning, what we need to do is we want to go ahead and we want to make child data assets or primary data assets of the provided stats. So this goes for the firearm and the attachment. From there, we go ahead and we can make our data assets from those. So these are just basically replacing the firearm. This is replacing the one for the handguard. The only difference being they add the potato stat to them. And lastly, we need to make a child firearm component. And the only thing we need to do is override the add firearm attachment stats and remove firearm attachment stats to accumulate our new stat. So we can easily access our custom stats by casting to our new type here. Lastly, under calculate procedural values, this is where we go through and we actually modify our procedural anim stats. Now, the only thing being, for replication purposes, potato might not replicate with the other firearm stats necessarily. So potentially, I'm not 100% sure on this. It might be 100% reliable as is. Well, nothing's 100%, but we might need to make this a rep notify for your custom stats and when they replicate. So it would probably be a good idea to build a structure containing all of your replication. And on here, where I'm at, that's where we could basically do the same logic. So similar to how it works in the thing, we can do calculate the new stats, but we don't have that. So we would just create a new event. So a custom event, call it calculate new stats tutorial. And I'm going to bring all of this down here. Plug it in. And our event that we overrode is also going to call calculate. I cannot spell. Probably because I spelled this wrong. I'm just going to call it calculate new stats. We're going to call that. And then in our onRep, we're also going to call it. So make sure on server side, we have super fast. Make sure on client, we also have it as super fast, which we do. So we know everything is replicated and good to go. So that's all. Once you have done this once. Like, I haven't actually done this. This was all just a kind of a pre-thought out process that I haven't fully implemented. But yeah, I'll probably end up replacing this video sometime in the future and shortening it because it did not need to be 20 minutes. So, bye.